we go. So welcome in for the session today. And the topic is managing relationship crises. Okay. And again, uh, we are not talking about only relationship which is romantic, but all kinds of relationships. I will go into that. So what we will do is we will, as usual in our session, we will begin by building some mental model about uh, understand what is a relationship crisis and why do they happen. It's good to know why do happen and what happens when we are in crisis so that you have an idea of what is going on, because most of it unfortunately is out of your control because you get into it. We'll talk about that. And then how to deal when you're in the middle of a crisis, because one of the most difficult thing is when you are in the middle of crisis, you kind of fall into the cracks where you feel alone, you feel you don't have any resources. So what do you do in that time? So some strategy there. And we will work on that. Actually, I will make you go through a strategy that then can help you keep this, and you can always use it as a resource to run it in case you get into crisis. Because when you're in the middle of it, you need help, you need support at that moment. Okay, and I will also talk a little bit about in Q&A about that. So let's get into the story. So I'm back to my relationship diagram. What I did is I actually colored in orange where we normally find, I mean, I work with thousands of people, and of course, where do you find occasionally crisis of relationships? So it's primarily with parents, with siblings, with spouse, of course, if you're married, or if you're romantic relationship, then with romance, go on, with children, many cases. And if you're working, then the worst, most difficult ones are the one with when you're having a crisis, a relationship crisis with your boss. But actually, you can apply this model to anything. So classically, what happens when you have a crisis? Because what is crisis? Because one or both of you, because if you're always first relationship crisis means there are two, and either one of them or both of them have taken a strong position, whatever is disagreement, right? So you take a very strong position, and the other one is not in agreement. So basically, that leads to a crisis because it's a crackdown of a kind of agreement of how the relationship is. That's why we go into crisis. Normally, one is blamed or made to feel guilty because it's your fault, or the other one is called it's your fault. So one always feels guilty when there is a crisis. One of the very classical feeling is of being isolated. I'm alone. I don't have anybody. Okay, so I'm on my own trying to deal with this situation which is coming. The kind of feelings you get into are frustration, anger, uh, a lot of guilt and shame, especially if you're blamed, then somebody has to take a guilt and shame. And to some extent, you actually wanting to give up. And and normally conflict is not because a crisis is not because it has happened one time and everything is just goes away or has led to crisis. There have been many instances of that repetition of that behavior or that same pattern, which then at a point in time just leads to what you call a crisis, which means I cannot take anymore and I want to give up. Often there's a lot of perception of regret, and that's why I say there's a guilt and shame, because what is always there is a lot is said or done, which you then come back saying, why did I do it? Why did I say that? So there is a lot of regret that starts to filter in into the system. So that's classically what you see or hear. And this can be between parents, siblings, between you and parents, between you and parents, and with classically everywhere. I mean, you can apply it to basically any kind of relationship around you. Now, I think it's important to know, why do we come to crisis in relationships? So there are many. Of course, there's a lot of social model and there's a lot of social studies or which have been done. But in my experience, when I work with people, I work a lot with people with crisis in the relationship. You find one or more of these. One, I mean, I picked up the most one that come to the top uh, for me when I've seen that is the one is communication issue. So we know relationship issues is communication is mother of all screw ups in relationships. So either it's a lack of communication or poor communication protocol, which means between the two, if there's a crisis, how will we resolve it kind of thing? There's no protocol. So it's like you go into the you get into a place where there is either a lot of argument, which is what also happens, but actually in an argument, everybody's talking or one is talking, but no one is listening. Okay, so there's a lot of talk, 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 but is somebody listening? Is somebody hearing what the other person is saying? No, because there's a reason, and we'll talk about that, why nobody is listening. So either both are shouting and saying things and talking, or when one is talking, but actually nobody is listening. Okay, so it comes back to this whole thing about lack of communication or a poor communication protocol set up to say, one, if in case we break down communication, what would we do? Where do we go to? Uh, Lack of emotional connection, that happens quite a bit. This is like there's a the purpose there's a you see a mismatch between expectation between the two. Okay, which means one is expecting something, another one is not. So which is classically a lack of emotional connection. It can be between friends, it can be between partners, it can be between whoever. There's a lot of backbiting, jealousy, cheating. I mean, romantic partner, you see that the person has cheated on you, etc. And if you go into the root, it is because there is some sense of emotional connection is missing, and which was overlooked. Uh, One very common thing you hear or see is toxic or abusive behavior, one of them, okay, which means there is absolutely lack of mutual respect. At least one is doing to the other. Substance abuse is happening. I mean, any kind of actually addiction could come in. Substance is one, but could also be other things that could come in. I mean, gambling, porn, uh, and you name it. And any kind of addiction actually creates a crisis in relationship. And normally it's one, not both. But could be both addicted to different things as well. It is possible, which is back to creating a, a toxic or abusive behavior. And then, of course, there is threats and any form of victimization. Normally, what you see in relationships, especially in romantic ones, is that there is a one giver and one receiver, which means one has, uh, let's say, what we call narcissist or toxic, uh, is a giver, and the other one is basically receiving, and so becomes a victim, and hence, as a victim, is only always on the receiving end. And so this you see, uh, I put this as one of the top issue that I see, which is one of the partner or one of the two has a toxic or a abusive behavior. At workplace, this is very common between bosses and employees. This is one of the basic reason of burnout and all kind of issues in relationships. Uh, and I put the last one really important is there's no one there to mediate now. And there's a reason I put it there is because, as I said, you start by small stories and then they start piling one on top of the other. And then it sits, there's a one story which then sits on another story, sit another story, and nobody came in to deflate or or make the two create any kind of communication or protocol and and agree and understand, the story of listening. Nobody's listening, and so there is no go-to person to mediate, and things can go very easily far, which means it can escalate out of control, and people say and do really bad things, and then ego comes in, and once ego is in, then nobody wants to back down, and hence you start to get into this place where basically you draw your lines. What we call the battle lines are drawn, and then what do you do from there? And then it becomes something which will repeat itself one after the other to a point when somebody wants to give up. So I put these as my top things. I know if you go and look at that, there are many, many other reasons, but this is what I found to be the most common one coming into, and I can go at the behind the scenes side, which is I'm not feeling good enough, I'm not worthwhile, etc. But I wanted to put what we see in front. Okay. Now let's get into strategy, because I think we are here because what do we do? Okay, in case we get into crisis. So I put them into four stages or etc. Uh, avoid. And when I say avoid, I tell you why. Now, what happens is when you get into an argument or any kind, etc., what starts to happen very quickly is your fight or flight or freeze system kicks in. So there's absolutely no communication between your left and right brain, which means logical brain, okay, has absolutely no uh, connection to your what we call the thinking brain. So the two are not at all in communication, and because there's no communication, fight or flight is kicked in. Now you want to either fight, clash, flight, run away, or freeze, which means go completely as if you are ready to die. Okay, I mean, that situation. Now, all three situation doesn't give you any insight into what is going on. It always will lead you to feel a victim, or or either it's all my fault or it's all the other person's fault. So there's no sense there in the system. Why? Because the the sensible part of your, or what we call the sense making part of you, is gone. Now it's survival mode, and in survival there is no sense making, and so you will do things or say things that you will most likely regret. And this is what creates an additional layer of story that you have to undo. Okay, so if you already have something going on between the two, and then you have how do you call it, an explosion or whatever, and then you are all over the place, and then you come back when things settle down, you say, well, what he did or she did or what I did and said is regrettable, but it's gone. And so now, but that thing now sits on top. Okay, so that's why I say, well, avoid, because if you know there's something going on which is not good, you must find a path to avoid getting into flight freeze state. And what can you do? Okay, so connect to self, because that's where the your inner system has all the wisdom when you're able to connect to it in a balanced state. Okay, so what can you do to get into balanced state? So some of the few techniques is, of course, breathing. Breathing is one of the best known technique, and there's a lot of research. I will post it into the group later on. Research around different kind of breathings to help you to get out from a certain state. HeartMath has done one kind of breathing. We use it a lot into our session, which is put a hand on your heart and start to slow down your breath consciously. So you follow breath and you start to slow it down. And what happens as you start to slow it down, oxytocin starts to be pumped into your system, and you start to, your whole fight or flight starts to get neutralized and you start to calm down. Okay, but you have to do it consciously. There are certain breaths which is like this is another one which immediately puts you into a certain state. So there are 4 or 5 different very interesting breath types that actually help you to get out of a state where you know you're out of balance. Okay, so you get into balance. So you connect to yourself, you will start to calm down, and it takes practice, it takes willingness, etc. The other way, which is I think I was sharing last time with Steve as well, remember, is grounding. Now, grounding, there is a lot of research around grounding, which is connecting to Mother Earth, and your body, your system feels it's not alone. I have the support of the Mother Earth, and it does interesting things, but you must do it quite conscious, which means lie down, eagle, put yourself like an eagle, spread your arms, connect to earth, lie down. If you can go onto grass, this is the best, but if you can't, you lie on a floor, hard floor, you feel the ground, you put an intention of literally drawing your uh, roots into Mother Earth and pulling energy, connecting and bringing resources into your body, and you keep staying there for some time. And 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, half an hour, 1 hour, whatever it takes, when you will get up from there, you will feel being in a different state. And there are so many tools that we have used in this group. Any tool that you connect to, tuning fork, one IFS session, do that. What you are doing is bringing energy to self, okay? So that the external world, whatever it is presenting to you, starts to get neutralized and is less threatening, and your inner world starts to become more active and more present. Now, this is to help you go to a state where you are in yourself. It doesn't mean the resolution is done. Now, what we have to normally do is, and I know it's not easy, I'm being too simplistic and binary, you have to also decide what do you want to do in this relationship, because that's key. Um, you can bring yourself in balance, but you are not alone. You're always a pair. And so, what about the other person? Okay. How is it that the other one, you can't change the person, but you can change your perception and your inner receptors toward the person. And sometimes some relationships are bound to stop, and some relationships can recover. But who decides? So you let your inner system make a choice. And we are going to do short exercise on that. And then you go deep inside and you start to find back, re-engage with the self, with clarity, with self-compassion, and start to have a conclusion and move forward. And what I always say is you should always have a trusted friend or a therapist or a mentor, somebody go to. Because within yourself, as you're going through a crisis, you may not have the enough energy to be able to come out of it. You should take some support build your resources back, and then you will be on the roll. That's what I would recommend. Okay. So those are my 4 steps to do. Okay. And now what we are going to do is we are going to practice. Okay. We always do some practice work when we come here. Okay. So what I want you to do is, if you have a story where you have a crisis, okay, and first I want you to do is to work on seeing if there is, how do you want to move forward. So I want you to think about a situation of a relationship where you are in, let's call it in crisis mode, or have been, or are. And I want you to think about 2 options looking future. And you can have more than 2 options, but for the purpose of exercise, let's start with 2 options. And you can choose any of those 2 options. One option is, for example, this relationship is fully recovered and we are growing and going forward. It's a good one. It's a one. The other one is, well, what if there is another option in this relationship, which means I release it completely and I create something new. And I know I'm being very simplistic, but you can choose 2 options for a relationship that you are in crisis with. Okay. So what I want you to do is to take a moment, think about a relationship that you are in crisis with, and I want you to imagine 2 options, and you call them option 1 or choice 1 and option 2 or choice 2. And whatever it is, your option, everything is fine. But just call it option 1, the second one option 2, and have a statement about the 2. Clear statement. I want you to settle in. Just feel relaxed. You can close your eyes and know that you are in a place where your body is starting to settle in, feels comfortable. If you have to move around so that the body feels comfortable, do that now. And see if you can follow your breath. Just follow the breath as it goes into your heart or chest area, and you breathe out. Just notice it going in and going out. Take another breath and notice it going in and going out. Now let's imagine you choose option 1. Think of the statement you said for option 1. Bring it into your awareness that this is a choice that you would like. And you had all the resources and everything present to make it happen. Now imagine 6 months have passed since you made the choice. And it's January of 2023. Look at your life. See what's going around you. What's happening in this relationship? What do you see? What do you hear? And notice how it feels to you. Now imagine 1 year has passed since you took the choice and it's now July of 2023. Look at your world. What's going on here in this relationship? What do you see? And what do you hear? And what do you feel? Notice your feeling. Imagine 5 years have passed. And it's July 2027 since you took this choice. Look at your life. What's going on around you? And what do you hear? What do you see? And notice how you feel. Now imagine 10 years have passed and it's now July 2032 since you took that option. How's your life? What's going on around you? What do you see? What do you hear? And how do you feel? Now if you can open your eyes and look around if there is a painting or if you can see the outside from your window. So just observe anything which, if you have a painting or anything, just pay attention to anything which looks like, yeah, you can look out of the window as well. Just observe for a minute, for a second. And now close your eyes. And imagine you took option 2 now. Think about the statement of option 2. And imagine you have all the resources to have this option. And imagine 6 months have passed since you took that decision of option 2. Look at your life. What's going on around you? What do you see? What do you hear? And how do you feel? And imagine 1 year has passed and it's now July 2023 since you took the decision. What do you see? How's your life? What do you hear? And how do you feel? And imagine 5 years have passed since you took a decision. It's now July 2027. Look at your life. What do you see? What do you hear? And how do you feel? And imagine 10 years have passed since you took this choice, and it's now July of 2032. How is your life? What do you see? What do you hear? And what do you feel? Now I want you to start to open your eyes, come back, and check within your system which option you would like to go for. If you got a clear answer. Most of the time you do get a clear answer. Sometimes it looks like in short term things become better, then in long term it changes. But you have kind of indication of where you would like to go. Take a moment to think about that. And if you're in a dilemma, think about that as well. Stay connected to this inner sense of where you want to go, or in case of dilemma, what you feel and see. What we asked is to the internal system to give us where our intuition wants to take us. But we are here and we have to go there. And to go there, we need to work on all the things that could block that path. The self-energy. So I just want you to see if you can be comfortable. Close your eyes again. And see where your inner sense wants you to go. And as you think about that, notice where in your body you sense any kind of feeling, any sensation. Just continue to breathe into your heart and connect to the choice you would like to make. And notice any sensation. Notice where you feel it in or around your body. See if you can connect to it, sense it, and notice how do you feel towards this sensation. You may feel you may feel fearful, you may be angry, you may be frustrated, or you may be disappointed, or whatever you feel. Just notice how you feel towards it as you connect to it. And you can even name it. You can ask it, tell me what's your name, and see what you get as a name. See if you can be a bit curious as to what this place may hold as information or something it wants you to know about itself. So just be a bit curious and, if possible, connect to it. And even be compassionate towards it. As you feel connected to it, compassionate towards it or curious about it, notice how that sensation changes or adapts. And because you ask it its name, you can also ask, what do you want me to know about you? Notice what is this telling you about itself. As you hear it speak, see if it makes sense to you what it's trying you to know. And see if you can be a bit more compassionate towards it. And again, notice how it reacts, how that sensation changes. Still connected to that part of you, you can ask it a few questions and see how it responds to you. The first question you can ask is, tell me what is your intention for me, and see what it responds. And whatever you heard is the reason why this part is present, most likely to protect you, to keep you safe. And see if it can make sense to you what its intention is. And notice how it feels for you when you hear the intention. How do you feel towards it? Now ask it another question. What are you afraid would happen to me if you did not do what you're doing? And see what it responds for you. What are you afraid would happen if you did not do what you do for me? And ask it, and then what happens? What are you really afraid of? And listen to the real fear. And you can ask again, and then what happens? So what it told you is what it is protecting you from. So see if you can be a bit more compassionate further, even more compassionate towards it. And notice how it feels for you. How it's reacting to you. Now ask it, since when are you doing this for me? You can ask it, how old are you? Tell you an age, a number. You can ask, what was going on at that time when you started doing this for me? See if it makes sense for you what it's telling you. And if it does, acknowledge and let it know that you understand. And see how it reacts to you. And now ask it, what needs to happen for you to be less present in my life? What needs to happen for you to be less present? And let it respond. See if it makes sense to you what it told you. And if it does, acknowledge. Let it know that you understand. And let it know how you feel towards it. Now share with it your vision of life. What do you want for yourself? As if you're talking to your inner parliament and you're telling them, this is what I want for me. Now thank this part and tell it. I'm going to be connecting to you every day and learning to be and getting to know you more. And if there is something it told you as an action to do, you're going to come back and follow it up. So let it know that you will be back and connect to it every day just to say hello and to know more. Thank it and take your time with your breath to start to come back and to be in the present moment. And if you want to take some notes, just take a few moments to take down some notes as I prepare for the tuning forks. So take a time to take your notes and we'll come back in a couple of minutes. Okay, so I'm going to work with the tuning fork. So what we're going to do, if you're here first time, so we are going to actually open the two centers, one above the head, one below the feet, so that we open the field and allow it to become more fluent and help you in the process we are doing. So I'm going to play the tuning fork. You're just going to listen. So stay in a comfortable place. I'm going to connect to all of you and just think about a wish. Maybe this vision that you shared with your inner self, just think about that and bring it into your awareness and see if every cell of your body can hear that wish of yours. Now, the way we work is we work through a breathing. So the breathing is simple. So you take a breath in with your nose, fill up your chest, and breathe out with your mouth. Okay. So you will hear me breathe, and you do the same. Okay, and just follow the process and relax. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to start below the feet, and then we'll go to the top of the head and open the channels. So I'm going to start at the bottom of your feet. So I'm just below your 1 foot below your feet, pointing towards your backbone, so that we open the channel from below the feet through the backbone to the top of the head. So take a breath. And any resistance you sense in any of your centers, just notice where you feel it. So I sense it in my second center. Frustration, disappointments, guilt or shame. So take a breath. So it's gone into solar plexus now. This is where anger or powerlessness comes. So take a breath. Now it's between the heart and the throat. It's called high heart. So this is where exhaustion or depression sometimes rests. So allow it to dissolve. Okay, so I'm going to ground you. Take a breath. Connect to Mother Earth. So now I'm going to go to the top of the head and open the channel from the head into the ground, so connecting to divine. So I'm pointing the tuning fork into the head, going through the backbone toward the feet, and see if there's any resistance. So I feel resistance in the throat, expression. So take a breath. Take a breath. So it's going into the root chakra, into the feet. If you feel stuck, just let it dissolve from below your feet. Okay, connecting it from divine to Mother Earth through your body. And I'm going to surround you with a cocoon. Take a breath. Take a breath. Take a moment to stay in that space. You can